So this week's episode of Dynazenon really puts the focus on the question, do kaiju have feelings or hearts? And those of us who have watched Gridman probably have a pretty good idea of the answer to that question of what we want to say, but for a character like Yomogi, someone who very much is feeling like they are living creatures rather than just objects to kill, it's a pretty conflicting feeling, especially considering the circumstance that he found himself in this episode. Working with Knight, amazing form, he's this giant cannon. They're basically a bunch of people trapped in a building, including the person that he seemingly is in love with, but it feels like, no, this is something that should be saved and controlled. Just instead of doing it like the kaiju enthusiasts over here, trying to destroy the world, what I should be doing is controlling them and giving them harmony. It's like he wants to be a Pokemon trainer and capture them all, but rather than Team Rocket level antics, he wants to do something good for the world. But in those situations, even when it feels like something's happening to him, he's getting these like mind blasts, headache things. Is he trying to be controlled? Is it meaning like he has the ability to control them? But in that moment, he has no choice but to fire. Though, on the flip side, even though he felt pretty bad, it felt like he got himself a date at the end of the episode, so at least that type of plotline is actually moving forward. Now, before we jump into anything else about this particular episode, there's been a lot of discussion about Gauma, the backstory, who is the person that he made promises to, and I think this is technically a spoiler because it is going to be me referencing stuff from the original Gridman series. I think it was like the 1993 Tokusatsu series, the live action one. Now, if you don't want to hear about anything, I'll obviously have timestamps in the video bar so you can just skip around to it. But I think it's interesting because there's been a lot of theories, and this is all going off of secondhand knowledge, though I guess if you watch episode 18 of that original series, you get a lot of information, but I guess it's pretty vague still because it's a lot of like, Gauma's supposed to be a mysterious character and most of the information comes from other characters giving exposition. But I guess the TLDR is Gauma, back in the day, fought with a princess who he promised to marry, and he had the ability to control dragons. After the battle, there was some generals that apparently killed him, poisoned him, and he was buried alongside his unit that obviously we start this anime off as, and I guess the princess killed herself to be buried next to him because I guess in their country, the idea of souls being buried next to partners means that they'll be able to be found again. And seemingly this show is doing the exact same thing that like Auntie and the first Gridman anime is doing, where it's not like a Megalobox situation where it's like a spiritual successor reimagining of a classic source material. It is all set in the same universe. And that's pretty interesting because a lot of people are saying, what if like the person he's looking for is Akane, which could be the case. Like I could honestly see Dynazenon going the route of having characters that we've come to know from Gridman or even a new character in Dynazenon being reincarnated as that princess. So it seems like the way that this franchise in the anime form is working is that it's allowing you to watch it fresh, whether you started with the Gridman anime, you started with Dynazenon, you can start anywhere, but the more knowledge you have on this universe, especially with the Tokusatsu series, the more understanding you'll come to understand with like the deeper meanings, but it still works as a self-contained story, which I think is really cool. I guess the biggest question will be, will he be able to meet up with the princess again in this anime? Most likely, I feel that's the direction we're going. But I think one of the bigger questions as well is seeing our boy back in the past have a girl flash a bunch of money in front of him just kind of feels like, get the hell out of there. It's like you found a drug dealer's pen there with all this money. Like, how the hell do you not get assassinated for that? It definitely feels like relationships are the key of this story. Like, yes, we're fighting kaiju and doing all this other crazy stuff, but ultimately it all boils down to lovers. Like, whether it's lovers in the past with a princess, whether it's lovers right now building up the will they, won't they, to now a married woman and the conflicting feelings some characters have. It feels like everything is very personal about this story, and that's why I think it really works, is that if you've seen any sort of tokusatsu series, it feels like this is that in anime form. Not even just with the kaiju battles, the way there's long pauses, the way the characters really just feel like a bunch of actors kind of like trying to make it feel realistic, like there is these awkward pauses, that they don't know how to communicate with each other, that there is these uncertainties, and that's what makes it so interesting to me. This show is just so remarkable, and I think while the action, I would argue, is probably more interesting than that of even the previous Gridman anime, action is less of a focus this time around than in Gridman. And I think that's interesting because while every time I see like characters like Auntie, Knight, using these cool new forms or fighting new kaiju, the kaiju literally is just kind of painting a trail. It doesn't feel like he's doing anything overly wrong. The thing I come out always most appreciating is the building relationships, or in the case of this episode, the question, do kaijus have hearts and feelings? And will that question cause Yomogi to make a fatal mistake at some point in time? It's very well possible. And that's what's interesting, is that there's different ideas of what to do. Yomogi wanting to keep something alive because there's nothing harmful about it. Someone like Gauma reluctantly accepting it because, well, he's kind of right, but then Knight saying, see, I should have killed it all along. This show is so good at character interactions, and I love that about this because it understands that nothing is ever what it appears to be, and it's okay to take character dialogue slower when you need to, because it makes it feel more personal even if we are fighting giant-ass creatures, which is why I think a lot of people like tokusatsu series, like Power Rangers, like Godzilla, like all these other things, because it always boils down to character interactions, even if there is giant beasts that they're fighting, and in the case of the live-action series, just people in giant costumes, which is kind of hilarious and badass all at the same time. So far, the only character that really I feel like is being left in the dust currently would be Hsieh herself, though we definitely still have the potential of the whole self-harm storyline, her covering up her wrists. It feels like she has cut herself in the past, the fact that she doesn't go to school right. So I'm curious what the purpose of her will be, especially considering they keep teasing her holding something that seemingly is getting bigger, looks kind of like a dragon. Is it going to form into a kaiju? Will it be some sort of end boss? Hard to say, right? But it does feel like the pieces are in place for everyone. Everything is built around relationships, and it feels like Hsieh might become one of the most unexpected wildcards of this show, and probably one of the most important additions by the time the story wraps up. Especially considering that there's no point in adding a character like her to a story unless she will have a really relevant plotline, and the fact that whatever she was holding on to over the past few episodes is seemingly becoming something, that says to me that either A, she'll become brainwashed and corrupt, or B, she will have the kind of saving grace to this entire equation, and I really don't know the direction they're going to go, but I can say I like every character that we have seen. It just feels like there's a mysterious atmosphere surrounding Hsieh for a reason, and that's going to be explained down the line. To me, this was just another great step forward in the Dynazenon anime, and while we definitely are very close to the endgame, it also feels like there's still so much left to tell, so I'm wondering how they plan to wrap it up. Will this be a surprise second season for Dynazenon, or will they actually find a satisfying way to conclude this, and then in a few years we'll get the next installment into this universe? Right now, if my money is on there's going to be a surprise second season announcement, because it does feel like there's still a lot less to tell, but if they can find a way to get a satisfying way to wrap it up, then I'll be perfectly fine. I mean, am I confident it will end conclusively? Yes, eventually it will. I just don't know if it will end conclusively with this season, or if there will be a part 2 down the line. Time will tell, but as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings, and definitely your theories about where the show is going to go, especially considering that who should be our antagonist? We're literally watching movies and goofing off while everything like this was happening. What do you think the true end goal for this anime is going to be, especially if you know knowledge of either the original Gridman stuff or even the previous anime? I'd love to read everyone's theories down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.